Help us reach 1,000 subscribers on our new channel Lesbian Stories. We hope you enjoy the story. The soft glow of my computer screen illuminated the dimly lit recording studio as I sat, lost in thought. My latest podcast episode was finished, but my mind refused to let go of the nagging doubts that had become my constant companions since the divorce. I'm Morgan Thompson, 34, and until recently, I thought I had it all figured out. Running my fingers through my blonde hair, I couldn't help but wonder how I'd ended up here, successful in my career, yet feeling so utterly lost in my personal life. The weight of my failed marriage pressed down on me, a constant reminder of my inability to maintain a meaningful connection. I glanced at the clock, 11:30 p.m. The thought of returning to my empty apartment made my stomach churn. On impulse, I grabbed my jacket and headed out into the cool Santa Ana night. The neon sign of a late-night diner caught my eye, its promise of warmth and comfort too tempting to resist. As I pushed open the door, the smell of coffee and grilled cheese sandwiches enveloped me. I slid into a booth, ordering a coffee from a tired-looking waitress. That's when I saw her. Sitting at the counter, a brunette with warm brown eyes that seemed to dance even in the harsh fluorescent lighting. She must have felt my gaze because she turned, offering a small smile that made my heart skip a beat. Before I knew what I was doing, I found myself moving to the stool next to her. "Rough night?" I asked, gesturing to her own cup of coffee. She laughed, a sound that seemed to brighten the entire diner. "Is it that obvious? I'm Gabriella, by the way. Gabriella Reyes." "Morgan Thompson," I replied, surprised by how easily the conversation flowed. We talked for hours, sharing our stories over endless refills. Gabriella, I learned, was 29 and an aspiring actress, struggling to make her mark in a cutthroat industry. As she spoke about her auditions and the roles she dreamed of playing, I found myself captivated. It wasn't just her words, but the way her eyes lit up, the passionate gestures she made. For the first time since my divorce, I felt a spark of something. Interest, excitement. I couldn't quite name it, but it both thrilled and terrified me. "So, a podcast host, huh?" Gabriella said, leaning in slightly. "What's that like?" I found myself opening up, sharing not just the triumphs of my career but the doubts and insecurities that plagued me. To my surprise, Gabriella listened intently, offering insights that made me see my experiences in a new light. As the night wore on, I realized I didn't want our conversation to end. There was something about Gabriella that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. When she laughed at one of my jokes, her hand briefly touching my arm, I felt a jolt of electricity that both excited and confused me. The waitress announced last call, startling us both. Had we really been talking for hours? As we prepared to leave, an awkward silence fell between us. I didn't want this to be the end, but I wasn't sure how to express that without sounding desperate. Gabriella saved me from my internal struggle. "This was really nice, Morgan. Maybe we could do it again sometime?" She scribbled her number on a napkin, sliding it towards me with a shy smile. As I watched her walk away, her figure silhouetted by the streetlights, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite unravel. Excitement, fear, and a hint of something else, something I wasn't ready to name yet. Back in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about Gabriella. Her laugh, her eyes, the way she listened so intently. I tried to rationalize it as simply enjoying a new friendship, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. As I drifted off to sleep, Gabriella's smile was the last thing on my mind. Little did I know, this chance encounter in a late-night diner was about to change everything I thought I knew about myself and love. The days following my late-night encounter with Gabriella passed in a blur of anticipation and nerves. I found myself staring at her number, scrawled on that diner napkin, debating whether to call. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of internal struggle, I sent her a text. "Coffee this weekend?" Her response was almost immediate, and before I knew it, we were meeting regularly at a quaint little cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of Santa Ana. Each time I saw her, my heart would do a little flip, a sensation I both relished and feared. During one of our coffee dates, as the afternoon sun streamed through the cafe windows, highlighting the warm brown tones in Gabriella's hair, I found myself opening up about my failed marriage. "I thought I had it all figured out," I confessed, tracing the rim of my mug. "But now, I'm not sure I know anything anymore." Gabriella reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine in a gesture of comfort. The touch sent a shiver down my spine. "Sometimes, Morgan, we need to fall apart to rebuild ourselves stronger," she said, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me catch my breath. As our meetings continued, I found myself sharing more and more. My fears about the future, my insecurities about my career, even my deepest hopes and dreams. Gabriella listened with a patience and understanding that I'd never experienced before, not even in my marriage. In turn, she opened up about her struggles as an aspiring actress. The constant rejections, the pressure to conform to Hollywood standards, the fear that she'd never make it. I found myself in awe of her resilience and determination. One evening, as we walked through a local park after our usual coffee, an idea struck me. "You should be a guest on my podcast," I blurted out, surprised by my own boldness. Gabriella's eyes widened. "Really? You think people would want to hear what I have to say?" "Absolutely," I assured her, my hand unconsciously reaching for hers. "Your insights are incredible. My listeners would love you." The day of the podcast recording arrived, and I found myself uncharacteristically nervous. As Gabriella settled into the chair across from me in the studio, I couldn't help but notice how the soft lighting accentuated her features, making her even more beautiful than usual. As we began recording, I was struck by how naturally we fell into conversation. The chemistry between us was palpable, our words flowing seamlessly as we discussed everything from the challenges of pursuing one's dreams to the importance of self-discovery. But it wasn't just our conversation that flowed. I found myself hyper-aware of every movement Gabriella made. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the subtle shift of her body as she leaned in to make a point. More than once, I stumbled over my words, distracted by the curve of her lips or the sparkle in her eyes. As the recording wrapped up, I knew we had something special. The energy in the room was electric, and judging by the flood of positive comments pouring in from listeners, they felt it too. "That was amazing," Gabriella beamed as we packed up the equipment. "I've never felt so, heard before." I turned to face her, suddenly aware of how close we were standing. "You were incredible," I said softly, my eyes locked with hers. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. I could feel the heat radiating from her body, smell the subtle scent of her perfume. My heart raced as I realized how much I wanted to close the distance between us. The spell was broken by the buzz of my phone, reminding us of the world outside our little bubble. "We should celebrate," I said quickly, trying to dispel the tension. "Drinks?" Gabriella nodded, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. "I'd like that." As we headed to a nearby bar, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. The easy friendship we developed was evolving into something more, something both thrilling and terrifying. Sitting at the bar, our knees brushing under the counter, I found myself hanging on Gabriella's every word. The way her eyes lit up when she laughed, the gentle touch of her hand on my arm as she made a point, it was all becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. With each drink, I felt my inhibitions lowering. I leaned in closer, drawn to her warmth, her presence. Our fingers brushed as we reached for our glasses, and this time, neither of us pulled away. As the night wore on, I realized I was standing on the edge of something life-changing. The connection I felt with Gabriella was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. It wasn't just attraction. It was a deep, soul-stirring recognition of kindred spirits. In a quiet corner of the bar, away from prying eyes, Gabriella turned to me. Her eyes searched mine, filled with a question I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. She leaned in, her lips mere inches from mine, and in that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. The world seemed to hold its breath as Gabriella's face hovered inches from mine. My heart raced, a mix of excitement and terror coursing through my veins. I could feel the warmth of her breath, smell the sweet scent of her perfume mingled with the faint aroma of whiskey. Time slowed to a crawl as she closed the final distance between us. Her lips met mine in a soft, tentative kiss that sent shockwaves through my entire body. It was nothing like I'd ever experienced before, softer, more delicate, yet infinitely more intense than any kiss I'd shared with a man. For a moment, I froze, overwhelmed by the sensations and emotions flooding through me. But then, almost of their own accord, my lips began to move against hers. My hand found its way to her cheek, cupping her face gently as our kiss deepened. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, I saw my own mix of wonder and uncertainty reflected in Gabriella's eyes. "I've wanted to do that for so long," she whispered, her fingers intertwining with mine. I opened my mouth to respond, but words failed me. Instead, I pulled her in for another kiss, this one more passionate, more certain. In that moment, all my doubts and fears seemed to melt away, replaced by a sense of rightness I'd never felt before. The rest of the night passed in a blur of stolen kisses and meaningful glances. We talked in low voices, our bodies close, fingers constantly seeking contact. It was as if a dam had broken, releasing all the pent-up emotion and attraction we'd been holding back. As the bar began to close, we reluctantly parted ways, the promise of more hanging in the air between us. I watched Gabriella's cab disappear into the night, my lips still tingling from her last kiss. The walk back to my apartment was surreal. The streets of Santa Ana seemed different somehow, as if the world had shifted on its axis. My mind raced, replaying every moment of the evening, every touch, every kiss. As I unlocked my door, a wave of exhaustion hit me. The emotional roller coaster of the night, combined with the alcohol, left me feeling drained. I collapsed onto my bed, still fully clothed, and fell into a deep sleep. Morning arrived with a vengeance, sunlight streaming through my curtains and piercing my alcohol-induced haze. As consciousness slowly returned, so did the memories of the previous night. Gabriella, the kisses, the revelation. I sat up abruptly, my head spinning from more than just the hangover. What had I done? Panic began to set in as the full implications of last night's events hit me. I, Morgan Thompson, divorced podcast host and lifelong heterosexual, had kissed a woman, and loved it. My phone buzzed, displaying a text from Gabriella. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." I stared at the message, a mix of emotions swirling in my chest. Excitement, fear, desire, confusion. How could I navigate these unfamiliar waters? What did this mean for my identity, my future? As I showered and dressed, my mind raced through possible scenarios. What if this was just a phase? What if I was simply lonely and latching onto the first person who showed me genuine affection? Or what if this was who I truly was, and I'd been suppressing it all along? I thought back to my marriage, trying to recall if I'd ever felt this level of attraction, this intense connection with my ex-husband. The answer was a resounding no. Sure, I'd loved him, but it had never felt like this electric, all-consuming, as if Gabriella's very presence set my soul on fire. As the day wore on, I found myself constantly checking my phone, rereading Gabriella's message, and fighting the urge to call her. I needed time to process, to understand what this meant for me. By evening, the walls of my apartment felt like they were closing in on me. I needed air, space to think. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, with no particular destination in mind. My feet carried me to the park where Gabriella and I had walked so many times. As I settled onto a bench, the cool evening breeze carrying the scent of nearby flowers, I allowed myself to truly feel everything I'd been trying to suppress. The truth was, I was terrified. Not of my feelings for Gabriella. Those felt more right than anything had in a long time. No, I was afraid of what this meant for my life, my identity. How would my friends react? My family, my listeners? As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I made a decision. I couldn't let fear hold me back from experiencing something that felt so right. Whatever this was with Gabriella, wherever it led, I owed it to myself to explore it. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and dialed Gabriella's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and slightly nervous. "Morgan? I was hoping you'd call." "Can we meet?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I think we need to talk." An hour later, we were back in the late-night diner where we'd first met. The familiar smell of coffee and grilled cheese provided a comforting backdrop as we faced each other across the table. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt like this before, especially not for a woman. But I know I want to explore it, with you." Gabriella reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. The simple touch sent sparks through my body. "We'll figure it out together," she said softly. "One day at a time." As we sat there, hands intertwined, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I didn't have all the answers, and the road ahead was uncertain. But with Gabriella by my side, I was ready to embark on this new chapter of my life, wherever it might lead. The weeks following our conversation in the diner passed in a whirlwind of stolen moments and secret rendezvous. Gabriella and I found ourselves drawn to hidden corners of Santa Ana, away from prying eyes and potential judgment. Each encounter was electric, filled with the thrill of exploration and the heady rush of new love. One evening, we found ourselves in a secluded park, the setting sun casting long shadows across the grass. Gabriella's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining with a familiarity that still sent shivers down my spine. She pulled me close, her lips meeting mine in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened, filled with a hunger that left me breathless. As we broke apart, I marveled at the softness of her skin, so different from the rough stubble I was accustomed to. My fingers traced the curve of her jaw, down the elegant line of her neck. Every touch, every caress was a revelation, igniting sensations I'd never experienced before. "You're beautiful," I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. Gabriella's response was a smile that lit up her entire face, her brown eyes shining with an emotion that mirrored my own. Despite the joy I found in Gabriella's arms, navigating this new aspect of my identity proved challenging. I found myself constantly on edge, paranoid that every glance from a stranger on the street was one of judgment or disgust. The weight of societal expectations and my own internalized beliefs pressed down on me, threatening to suffocate the happiness I'd found. One afternoon, over coffee with my closest friend Sarah, I finally worked up the courage to confide in someone about my relationship with Gabriella. The words tumbled out in a rush, a mix of excitement and fear coloring my voice. Sarah listened silently, her expression unreadable. When I finally fell quiet, my heart pounding in my chest, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Morgan," she said softly, "all I want is for you to be happy. If Gabriella makes you happy, then that's all that matters." The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. Tears pricked at my eyes as I realized that, for the first time since this all began, I could breathe freely. Sarah's acceptance was a balm to my worried soul, a reminder that love, in all its forms, was something to be celebrated, not hidden away. Buoyed by Sarah's support, I found the courage to be more open with Gabriella about my struggles. One night, curled up on my couch, I poured out my fears and insecurities. Gabriella listened patiently, her fingers running soothingly through my hair. "I know it's not easy," she said when I'd finished. "Coming out later in life comes with its own set of challenges. But Morgan, you're one of the bravest people I know. We'll face this together, one step at a time." Her words, her unwavering support gave me strength. With Gabriella by my side, I felt like I could face anything, even the daunting prospect of reshaping my entire identity. As our relationship deepened, so did our physical intimacy. Each encounter was a delicate dance of discovery, both of each other and of ourselves. I marveled at the softness of Gabriella's skin, the gentle curves of her body so different from what I was accustomed to. One night, in the privacy of my apartment, our kisses grew more heated, hands exploring with increasing boldness. Gabriella's fingers found the hem of my shirt, hesitating for a moment before slipping underneath. The feeling of her warm hands against my bare skin sent shockwaves through my body. "Is this okay?" she whispered, her eyes searching mine for any sign of discomfort. I nodded, unable to find my voice. Slowly, reverently, Gabriella began to undress me. Each newly exposed inch of skin was met with gentle kisses and caresses that left me trembling with desire. When she reached for the clasp of my bra, a purple, soft velvet number I'd chosen specifically for this moment, I felt a brief flash of nervousness. But as Gabriella's eyes met mine, filled with love and desire, all doubts melted away. Our lovemaking was tender and exploratory, punctuated by whispered encouragements and breathless sighs. Gabriella's touch was both familiar and thrillingly new, igniting sensations I'd never experienced before. As we lay tangled together afterwards, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight streaming through the window, I felt a profound sense of rightness settle over me. This was where I belonged. With Gabriella, I was free to be my truest self, unconstrained by societal expectations or my own preconceived notions of who I should be. As the weeks turned into months, Gabriella and I fell into a comfortable rhythm. Our relationship deepened, growing stronger with each passing day. I found myself opening up in ways I never had before, sharing hopes and dreams I'd long kept buried. But even as our love blossomed, the outside world continued to turn. Gabriella's acting career began to gain traction, with more auditions and small roles coming her way. I threw myself into my podcast, drawing inspiration from my own journey of self-discovery to create content that resonated deeply with my listeners. Life seemed perfect, a delicate balance of love, personal growth, and professional success. But as I would soon learn, the universe has a way of shaking things up just when you least expect it. One ordinary Tuesday afternoon, as I sat in my recording studio preparing for my next podcast episode, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name that flashed across the screen sent a jolt of shock through my system, my ex-husband. As I stared at the phone, my finger hovering over the answer button, I couldn't shake the feeling that this call was about to upset the delicate balance of my newfound happiness. Little did I know just how right that feeling would prove to be. My hand trembled as I answered the call, my ex-husband's voice washing over me like a cold wave. "Morgan, I'm in town. Can we meet?" The request, so simple on the surface, sent my world spinning. I agreed, more out of shock than genuine desire to see him. As I hung up, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. What could he possibly want after all this time? I arrived at the coffee shop early, my nerves on edge. When he walked in, looking much the same as he had when we were married, I felt a confusing mix of familiarity and distance. We exchanged awkward pleasantries, dancing around the real reason for his visit. Finally, he dropped the bombshell. "I'm getting remarried, Morgan. I wanted you to hear it from me." The news shouldn't have affected me. After all, I had moved on, found happiness with Gabriella. But hearing it stirred up a whirlwind of emotions I thought I'd long since buried. Memories of our life together, the dreams we'd shared, the pain of our separation. It all came rushing back. I left the meeting in a daze, my mind reeling. Without thinking, I found myself at my recording studio, seeking solace in the familiar environment. As I sat there, surrounded by the tools of my trade, I felt the walls I'd carefully constructed around my heart begin to crumble. The emotional turmoil of seeing my ex-husband bled into every aspect of my life. I withdrew from Gabriella, unable to articulate the storm of confusion and pain swirling within me. How could I explain that seeing him had shaken me to my core, making me question everything I thought I knew about myself and my journey? Gabriella, sensing my distress, tried to reach out. Her gentle inquiries and attempts at comfort only served to heighten my guilt and confusion. I pushed her away, retreating into myself as I struggled to make sense of my roiling emotions. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between us grew. Our once passionate encounters became stilted and awkward, overshadowed by the unspoken tensions between us. I threw myself into my work, using my podcast as a shield against the emotional reckoning I knew I needed to face. One evening, as I sat editing my latest episode, my phone buzzed with a text from Gabriella. A photo popped up, her smiling brightly on a film set, arm in arm with a stunning redhead. The caption read, "Met the most amazing actress today. Can't wait for you to hear about it." The sight of Gabriella, looking so carefree and happy, with another woman by her side, sent a jolt of jealousy through me. It was irrational, I knew, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, just as I'd lost my marriage. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself scrolling through social media. A post from the redhead in the photo caught my eye, a flirtatious comment on one of Gabriella's pictures. The green-eyed monster reared its ugly head once more. When Gabriella called the next day, excited to tell me about her new role and the friends she was making on set, I couldn't contain my bitterness. "Sounds like you're having a great time with your new friend," I snapped, immediately regretting the words as soon as they left my mouth. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Gabriella spoke again, her voice was tight with hurt and confusion. "Morgan, what's going on with you? You've been distant for weeks, and now this? Talk to me, please." But I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat, a tangled mess of insecurity, fear, and unresolved pain. Instead, I made an excuse and ended the call, leaving Gabriella's pleas unanswered. The following days were a blur of missed calls and unanswered texts. I threw myself into work with renewed vigor, using it as an excuse to avoid confronting the mess I'd made of my personal life. But the hollow ache in my chest grew with each passing day, a constant reminder of what I was losing. It all came to a head one rainy evening. I was in my apartment, nursing a glass of wine and wallowing in self-pity, when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Gabriella standing there, drenched from the rain, her eyes blazing with a mix of hurt and determination. "Enough," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. "We need to talk, Morgan, really talk. The dam finally broke. All the emotions I'd been suppressing came pouring out. My confusion over seeing my ex-husband, my fears about my changing identity, my insecurities about our relationship. Gabriella listened, her expression softening as I laid bare my soul. When I finished, emotionally exhausted, Gabriella took my hands in hers. "Morgan," she said softly, "I'm not going anywhere. I love you, all of you, including your past and your struggles. But you have to let me in. We're in this together, remember?" Her words, so full of love and understanding, broke through the last of my defenses. I collapsed into her arms, letting out all the pain and fear I'd been holding on to. Gabriella held me, her presence a balm to my wounded soul. As we talked into the night, I realized how close I'd come to losing something precious. My own insecurities and unresolved issues had nearly destroyed the beautiful relationship we'd built. I vowed then and there to do better, to be more open and honest, not just with Gabriella but with myself. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, I woke to find Gabriella still by my side. As I watched her sleep, her face peaceful in repose, I felt a surge of love and gratitude. We had weathered our first real storm as a couple, and though the road ahead might not be easy, I knew we were stronger for having faced it together. With a light heart, I slipped out of bed and headed to my home office. It was time to channel all of these experiences, all of this growth, into something meaningful. As I sat down at my microphone, I knew exactly what my next podcast episode would be about. The courage to face our fears, the strength found in vulnerability, and the transformative power of love. As I began to speak, pouring my heart out to my listeners, I felt a sense of purpose and clarity I hadn't experienced in weeks. This was my story, raw and real, and I was finally ready to share it with the world. The warmth of the sunlight streaming through my windows felt invigorating as I sat, microphone poised, ready to share my newfound clarity with the world. Each word I spoke felt like a small act of defiance against the turbulence of the past few weeks. I poured my heart out, detailing my journey of self-discovery, the trials of love and loss, and the beauty of embracing uncertainty. As I recorded, I spoke not just about my relationship with Gabriella, but about the universal struggles we all endure when confronted with our true selves. I wanted my listeners to feel connected, to understand they weren't alone in their fears, and that love could transcend the boundaries we often impose on ourselves. When I finally hit stop, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration coursed through me. It felt like I had released a heavy burden, cleansing my soul with every confession. I played back the recording, listening intently. It was raw, honest, and everything I wanted it to be. I was ready to share my truth with the world. Later that evening, as I prepared to send the episode out to my subscribers, a familiar tingling excitement filled the air. I knew this episode would resonate, that it had the potential to spark conversation and inspire my listeners to reflect on their lives, just as I had. But there was also a flicker of anxiety, a reminder of all the uncertainties that still lingered. Still, it all paled in comparison to the joy of being with Gabriella. She arrived shortly after I finished uploading the episode, a radiant smile lighting up her face as she entered my apartment. The sight of her, full of life and love, made everything else fade into the background. "Hey, superstar," she teased, her eyes sparkling. "Ready to celebrate our podcast's impending breakthrough?" I laughed, the sound feeling foreign but welcomed, releasing the last traces of tension I held onto. "Only if you promise to give me a reason to celebrate." As dinner plans unfolded, we found ourselves in the kitchen together, laughing and joking as we cooked. It was a simple moment but felt monumental, an ordinary evening filled with warmth, friendship, and love. Over a candle-lit dinner, we shared our dreams and fears, the conversation flowing effortlessly as always. Gabriella told me about her latest audition, while I recounted the details of my podcast episode. It was comforting to know that no matter the ups and downs we faced, we always had that thread of connection running between us. After dinner, we settled on the couch to watch a movie. It was one of those romantic comedies that still managed to feel fresh and entertaining. Halfway through, I felt Gabriella's head resting on my shoulder, her warmth enveloping me like a cherished blanket. As the credits rolled, I looked at her, my heart swelling with admiration. "I can't believe how lucky I am," I whispered, my voice barely above a sigh. Gabriella turned to face me, her eyes shining with sincerity. "We're in this together, remember? You're stuck with me now." We shared a soft laugh before her expression turned serious. "Morgan, I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm here. I love you. No matter what, We'll face everything together." Her words wrapped around my heart, and I found myself nodding, the weight of my past no longer pressing against me. I leaned closer and kissed her gently, savoring the tenderness of the moment. But despite the warmth between us, a small voice of doubt flickered in my mind. Questions arose again. What changes awaited us in the future? Did we have the strength to face the world together, or were we merely in a bubble of shared bliss, impervious to reality? But in that moment, those questions seemed irrelevant. We were together, and the connection we shared felt all-encompassing. As the evening wore on, our hands found each other in the growing darkness. With the outside world fading away, it was just us, navigating this uncertain territory together, our laughter echoing softly in the corners of my living room. In the days that followed, I received an outpouring of support from my listeners regarding my last podcast episode. Messages flooded in, people expressing gratitude for the honesty, sharing their own stories of love, fear, and courage. I hadn't realized how communal the journey of self-discovery truly was until then. Gabriella and I spent more time together, exploring new facets of our relationship. We ventured to art galleries, attended music festivals, and deepened our bond in ways that surprised us both. Gradually, over dinners and quiet evenings, we began to weave our lives together, step by tentative step. We were both still navigating the challenges of our pasts. There were conversations about family expectations, societal pressures, and lingering self-doubt that made our path feel rocky at times. Yet we faced each hurdle together, hand in hand, our shared commitment to one another shining brightly. One crowded Saturday afternoon, we stood at a farmer's market, the air filled with laughter and the scent of fresh produce. I watched as Gabriella connected with farmers and artisans, her passion and enthusiasm infectious. I bought a basket of strawberries, and she took my hand, intertwining our fingers as we strolled through the bustling crowd. "Look at us," I exclaimed with a laugh. "We're the quintessential couple, aren't we?" Gabriella grinned, her eyes sparkling. "If this is cliché, then I'm all for it. I wouldn't trade this for anything." We bought flowers, indulged in baked goods, and filled our bags with seasonal fruits. All the while, the sun warmed our backs, wrapping us in a cocoon of happiness. If this was what love could be, I was eager to explore every facet of it. As we shared a laugh over 2 cones of artisan gelato, everything felt perfect. But still, I couldn't shake the thought of my ex-husband's impending marriage and the lingering uncertainty of my relationship with Gabriella. That night, cuddled under our blankets, I whispered my fears to Gabriella. She listened, her eyes steady and understanding. "Life is inherently unpredictable, Morgan," she said gently, brushing a stray hair from my face. "But we make the choices that shape our lives. As long as we're honest with each other, we can face whatever comes our way." I nodded, feeling a little lighter. In her presence, I felt braver and more centered. Perhaps it was okay not to have everything figured out. Maybe it was enough to simply embrace the journey, with all its uncertainties. As weeks blended into months, it became clear that we were both evolving. The fear of the unknown still loomed, but it no longer consumed me. Every day spent with Gabriella was a step toward building something beautiful, an open-ended relationship filled with growth, dreams, and love. And so, our story continued to unfold, with no clear ending in sight. Each moment together held infinite possibilities, and as we faced the future hand in hand, I realized the greatest adventure of all was just beginning. The world before us was vast and wide, and I embraced it wholeheartedly, ready for whatever came next.